So we are going to start with a timeline of ownership of the farmstead. So we can trace our site all the way back to a land grant from William Penn. So in 1686, Thomas Duckett was given 300 acres of land in Edgemont Township for a quit rent of 3 shillings. Now we have this really cool map that shows the land. So this is a map of landholders and their lots in Philadelphia, Chester, and Bucks counties. It was made around 1687 and is currently in the Library of Congress. So within the map, we can see that Thomas Duckett is listed as number 58. Now, if we look even closer, we're going to try and see where it is on the map. So within the map, you can see Thomas Duckett, number 58. If you look closer, you can see that we're in Chester County. Ooh, microphone, sorry. In the Edgemont Township area. And if we go even closer, you can see, oh, it's a little bit blocked. We are right above that R, like right in there. So it's really cool. We can trace it all the way back to this map made in 1687. All right, so back to the timeline of the farmstead. So, pretty quickly after Duckett was granted the land in 1686, he sells the land to Barnabas Wilcox the same year in 1686. So the land stayed within the Wilcox family until his passing, when his heirs then sold the land to Ralph Lewis in 1705. So they willed it to his son, Samuel, and then he promptly sold the land to Joseph Pratt on May 20th, 1720. After that, we know that Joseph Pratt first is the first Pratt generation who lived on the site. The land stayed in the Pratt family for 100 years until Joseph Pratt IV sold the land to the bishops in 1820. After that, the land passed through a bunch of different hands until it ultimately became part of Ridley Creek State Park in the mid-1960s. Okay. So, here is a family tree of the Pratt family. So in 1682, Abraham Pratt and Jane Pratt left England, indenturing themselves to earn passage to William Penn's new colony. So in exchange for years of labor, they gained land and a new start in Pennsylvania. I want to point out that the Pratt family moved to the colony only 1 year after the land was given to William Penn from King Charles II in 1681. So this was still pretty new. Their son, Joseph Pratt I, bolded in that first line. He was born in Pennsylvania. He became a skilled cordwainer, so a shoemaker who makes new shoes from new leather. In 1720, he purchased 380 acres, the land where the farmstead is now, and he and his wife Sarah raised 6 children there, beginning a multi-generational legacy. So Abraham Pratt, the father of Joseph I, and his family, they were actually Keithian Baptists, which was a religious sect which split from the Quakers in the 1690s. So Joseph Pratt I was not a Quaker. He married Jane Edwards, who was a Quaker at the time, but she was ultimately read out of her meeting for marrying out of the Quaker faith. We know that Joseph Pratt I remarried after Jane Edwards died after the birth of Joseph Pratt II. And then he married Mary Jones at Christ Church, which was a wealthy Episcopal church in Philadelphia. So after Joseph Pratt II married Jane Davis in a Goshen meeting, so we can presume that he was a Quaker member at that time. So Mary Jones Pratt, remember Joseph Pratt I's second wife, she was asked to be buried at the Goshen meeting where Joseph Pratt II and his wife and children were members. So we then know that Joseph Pratt III, there's going to be a lot of Joseph Pratts in this, so bear with me, the third, him and his wife were Quakers until they were read out of their meetings. So Joseph Pratt III was read out of his meeting for multiple different reasons. The first having a son out of wedlock with Esther Green. Their son, also named Joseph Pratt, but not Joseph Pratt IV. A little bit confusing, so now there's going to be 5 in play, but 4 of them have titles with it. So Joseph Pratt IV, or Joseph Pratt, but not Joseph Pratt IV, he then became a carpenter and lived in New London, PA. The other reason Joseph Pratt III was read out of his meeting was he swore an oath of allegiance to the new government. So this oath, the Test Act of 1777, was required by Pennsylvania law, but directly violated Quaker beliefs against oath-taking and the allegiance to secular power. He later appeared on the Chester County militia rolls, but saw no combat. This is one of the few direct connections we have of the Pratt family and the Revolution. And while we would immediately assume by taking the oath that meant the Pratt family was patriots, the oath swearing was required by law. So we have no written record of the explanation of why he took the oath, and therefore cannot make any direct claims about the views of the Pratts. And then Joseph Pratt III later married Sarah Davis. She was read out of her meeting. She was Quaker. She was read out of her meeting because of the fact that she married her cousin, Joseph Pratt III. So they had 3 children, and one of them was then named Joseph Pratt IV. All right, that's going to be the end of all the Josephs for now. Okay, so the Pratt family enslaved at least 4 people: Peggy, Cuffy, Susanna, and York. Joseph Pratt the first 1754 will listed Peggy and Cuffy, requiring that Cuffy be manumitted once he paid or secured 35 pounds to Pratt's son, Joseph Pratt II, and that Peggy pay 25 pounds. It is impossible to know Joseph's first motives for manumitting Peggy and Cuffy. He died in 1754 just as opinions in the Quaker community were changing, so it is possible that he was affected by these changes, but again, his motivations were unclear. The enslavers who manumitted enslaved individuals had to put up a bond to the government. Often the responsibility for obtaining the bond was put on the enslaved individual by requiring them to pay their enslaver, just as Joseph I did. Unfortunately, records do not indicate whether Peggy and Cuffy obtained their freedom. Joseph Pratt II enslaved at least 2 individuals, Susanna and York. Susanna, or Susanna Cuff, was manumitted by Joseph Pratt II in 1775, just a few months before he died. And in the manumission document, Joseph Pratt II attests that Susanna was 22 years old in 1775. Furthermore, he states that he enslaved her for 21 years, meaning that in or around 1754, Pratt had enslaved a 1-year-old Susanna. This has given rise to the theory that Susanna was the child of Peggy and Cuffy. The similarities of Cuffy's name and Susanna's last name suggests some connection, and Susanna would have been born the same year that Joseph Pratt I died. If this is not the case, though, it is unclear why Joseph Pratt II enslaved Susanna. Susanna's background and what happened to her after she was manumitted remains a mystery. In his will, he also mentions an enslaved man named York. Joseph Pratt II required his sons to care for York when York could no longer work. Such requests were not uncommon or unheard of. Sorry, that's... Why Joseph Pratt II did not free York outright is uncertain. We know that 2 years after Joseph II's death, his sons manumitted York. In the tax records, we also see a freeman listed. At this time, freemen referred not to free people of African descent, but to individuals who lived in a municipality but did not own their own land in their own right. So perhaps this indicates that York continued to live on the Pratt's farm under the care, but we cannot be sure. So remarkably, their names, Peggy, Cuffy, Susanna, and York, have been preserved, though in the wills of Joseph Pratt II and Joseph Pratt III. Beyond this records, however, little is known about their lives. Okay. So, the Pratt farm was located in Edgemont Township, Chester County, which is now Delaware County, hence we are here. The farm was not isolated. They were surrounded by other farms, and it was close to Newtown Square, which was the first planned inland town by William Penn. It was about 14 miles from Philadelphia and about a half-day's ride. So this map, as well as the following map, are from Chester County 1777 Property Atlas GIS Interactive Map, which is a really cool tool. And if anyone lives in an area that was Chester County and Delaware County now, this is very cool to look at. Okay. So, in the broader landscape of the Revolutionary War, the Pratt family and the farm was near the action, yet how involved, again, we are not quite sure. So we know that Joseph Pratt III pledged an oath to the new United States in 1779. Again, his reason and intent is unclear. And from this map, we know that there were British plunderings in townships surrounding Edgemont Township, yet the map does not show any plunderings in Edgemont Township itself, nor the immediate farms of the Pratt. This could be because there was no plunderings in Edgemont Township by the British, or it could be due to a lack of records, or the plundering occurred during a different time than the period represented.
What do you mean by plundering?
So like taking of land, taking of livestock, yeah. Yes. Right. Right. Yeah, no, that's okay. Right.
Just land or not.
Yeah. So while this is an absolutely amazing tool, it doesn't show any plunderings by the Continental Army. So we don't know if there was any plunderings by the Continental Army on or surrounding the farm. I just want to point out, not that far from Valley Forge, so who knows? Okay, now I'm going to pass it over to Sarah. Yeah, I can do the clicking.
Oh, no. Do you need to do it?
Oh, no.
Okay.
What do you need me to do?
No, that's fine. So after the Pratt family sold the land in 1820, so about 1 year and 1 day from when they owned it in 1720, the property changed ownership several more times, including being owned and rented out by the Jeffords family, whose property would eventually become Ridley Creek State Park. So some of you might be familiar with the park and the park mansion. That was the original home of the Jeffords family, and it now holds the park offices, our offices, and is a very popular wedding venue. In 1962, the last family to permanent resident of what is now the farmstead left, and in 1966, all of the Jeffords property, which at the time was roughly 2,606 acres, became now what is known as Ridley Creek State Park. So within the park is us.
Let's see. Nope. We're going to figure out this technology one of these times. There we go.
So that's a full park map, and then you can see where we're located within the park. So, oops, nope.
Parking lot, and then the actual park.
How do I get it?
You mean come back over there?
You said the 60s?
Yes.
Oh, so people were living in it up through...
1962 is what I have the record, the last family that lived there. Then it became abandoned for several years until 1966 when it became part of the park. And then in the 70s, which we'll get to and a little bit later, is when the Bishop Mills Historical Society took over.
Can I ask what,
Sure, yeah.
this later, but Edgemont with the E comes and goes,
Yeah.
it seems. That the
Correct.
everything-
I
and
gotcha.
it-
How do I
like
get to the next
Pittsburgh
slide?
With the H coming and going, is it, it was always without the E, right?
Yeah, I don't see any records with the E, perhaps. Thank you.
I think the E is the British
Yeah.
name.
Yeah. Although a lot of people spell it wrong.
Right.
Right. But I mean, there are signs up there. There are signs on Route 3 that say have the E.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we do two different spellings. We use it without the second E at the time. So here is another park map. I know it's a little hard to tell here, but this map shows the state park boundaries in 1998 over the colonial Landover boundaries from the period of 1760 to 1790, which is roughly the period of interpretation for the farmstead. By 1800, there were about 611 people living in Edgemont Township, according to census data. And around the same time, the Pratt's neighbor, Abraham Farr, did a neighborhood census on trades. And he documented that there were 5 shoemakers, 3 bakers, 3 smiths, 2 masons, 5 carpenters, 2 joiners, 5 weavers, 2 tailors, 2 storekeepers, I'm still going, a chairmaker, tanner, saddler, millwright, and 45 farmers. So now you can see why we needed our speaker notes. And
also that's the far right there, so Pratt's.
yeah, there you go, perfect. And 45 farmers, so this was a very active community, and the Pratt family was one of those farmers. Now, looking at this map, you can see what becomes of our site in the top right corner. Thank you, Paige is going to do the tech for me. And this is where the Pratt farm was located between 1760 and 1790. And looking at it closer, you can see how our site is laid out today. So we have about 112 acres of that original 380. And so the parking lot is there, and then the main part of the farm in this area.
My shaky hands are trying to outline. There you go. I know, I'm the computer whisperer now.
Yeah, Paige is going to do that.
Oh, the colors are a little bit distorted on.
Ooh, it is. It is trippy. We love it. Okay, so now the museum origins of the farmstead began with a group called the Bishop Mills Historical Society, named after that 18th century mill village in the area known as Sycamore Mills. So again, the Park Mansion is located on Sycamore Mills Road. The group was formed to preserve and protect the historic homes that were within now the proposed state park, many of which are now included on the National Register of Historic Places. In 1971, this group visited a neglected colonial farmhouse within the park dating back to the 1690s. I bet you can guess which neglected colonial farmhouse that ended up being. So this spot was ideal for a farm museum because it was a working farm for over 250 years and had original buildings, including 18th century farmhouse, a stone cabin, spring house, and 2 barns, all intact but deteriorating. In 1973, the Bishop Mills Historical Society gave birth to the Bishop Mills Historical Institute, with the goal of establishing a colonial farm or plantation as a museum of Pennsylvania folklife. Though through a working farm museum, they could demonstrate how ordinary folks lived and worked on a colonial era farm in the nearby small mill community, and in 1973, a long-term lease with the Pennsylvania Bureau of State Parks was signed for that 112 acres of the original 380. So in 1976, so this is our 50th year, for the bicentennial, the site was renamed Colonial Pennsylvania Plantation and was open to the public. This concept was unique. They created a site dedicated to the ordinary people of the Revolution, but also allowed visitors to observe and even to participate in the skills that were central to life in the past on a daily transitioning historic farm. I don't know why.
We're gonna get there.
Anyway, it doesn't like when I do that, so. Okay, so here are some of the founders and original members of the farmstead. They actually lived on site and spent their time doing meticulous historical research, documentation, archaeological digs, and restoration of the farm property. So again, the farmhouse had been lived in since 1690s to 1962, so there were a lot of layers on history that they had to take back to approximately 1760 to 1790. Oh, good, it worked. Hey, now I need to get it here.
Oop.
Nope.
You're almost there. Here you go.
Here we go. Okay, so here you can see the progression of the main farmhouse from 1973 to 1975. By the spring of 1974, the farmhouse kitchen had been made operational. And by operational, we mean 1790s, which is now a highlight for visitors and students. So the kitchen, if you're looking at it, is to the far left, right behind the well. The restoration, thank you, Paige. The restoration of the spring house, which is, again, to the far left, was underway, and dedication took place in 1975. From 1977 to 78, the farmhouse interior was the main focus of restoration with the help of 18th century Chester County estate inventories. And then in 1978, the existing 19th century animal barn was demolished along with 20th century improvements around the farm, and a reconstructed 18th century version was erected in its place.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
The big sycamore that is in front, is that it, that little tree?
No, so there's different angles. So the sycamore is to the left here, and I think it's just off
Yeah,
camera.
I think that's probably it right there. And that might be some of the branches.
That's a lot of
Oh, yeah, we were wondering about the well,
Yes, about the well.
because it's not in 73, but it's in 75.
So it is in 73. You just can't tell because it hasn't been built up yet.
Yeah.
So it is at ground level in 73, and then between the period they built it up. So everything ground below is like predates the kitchen
Ooh, sorry.
property. Yeah, no, that's okay.
But it actually was still, you could still put a bucket down.
Yes. My understanding, I regretfully was not here in 1973 on the site, so my understanding was that it was at level and you went down. Hmm. And those that know us, this is what our farmhouse looks like today. We're gonna do the check for me. And so another featured building on our site is our wagon barn. And so on the left is the restoration of the wagon barn that was completed in 1976. And on the right is in 2023, it houses our grain storage. So it was a wagon barn or a grain barn. It now hosts our woodworking shop and students in summer camps on rainy days. So it's a flex space for us. I'm just gonna. And so this is very hard to read, but I'm going to read it for you. So our site focuses on roughly 1760 to 1790. And a lot of the information that we have that we use to interpret comes from Joseph Pratt II, III, and IV, who lived on the property, so their wills and inventories. While we don't exclusively interpret the Pratt family, we do use this information as a lens to view kind of what an ordinary farmer in this period was doing and what they had. So Joseph Pratt II, in his inventory of goods and chattel rights, had 4 horses, horned cattle, sheep, and swine. He grew oats, flax, Indian corn, buckwheat, potatoes, and hay, and had a cider mill, casks, cheese press, wagon carts, and carriage plows. In comparison to Joseph Pratt III, when we look at this inventory, there's a lot more detail.
Oh, wait, hold on, what's that? There we go.
There we go. So a lot more detail. So in comparison, Joseph Pratt III had 11 cows, 10 horses, including 2 mares, a 3-year-old colt, a 2-year-old colt, 2 yearlings, 17 sheep, and 7 swine. He grew wheat, barley, rye, Indian corn, potatoes, and hay, and had 2 churns, a cheese press, a cart wagon, and a plow wagon, cider vessels, and 3 stocks of bees. Bees. And so by comparison, we have 2 horses, including a draft horse and a standard bred, an ox team in training, 12 sheep, 10 ducks, 5 hens, 7 chicks, and 4 new turkeys. And so these are some images of the historic animals on the farm, including pigs. We were just talking earlier. Pigs would have been very predominant on a colonial farm. We do not currently have pigs. Some of our elderly sheep are currently occupying our pig pen.
What's your current cat situation?
We have 1 cat cousin, and she's been there for over 10 years. Mm-hmm.
I remember the other one who used to sleep on the wall.
Oh, was that Annie?
That was Annie. Yeah.
Annie, yep. Annie has a good home now. She's no longer a barn cat. And so here are some of our animals today. So our sheep are a variety of heritage breeds. So breeds that would have been typical in the 18th century, including Hog Islands. Gus and Elliot came from Mount Vernon, and then Lester Longwolves, Franklin and Marshall came from Colonial Williamsburg. So we have Marshall in the front, Franklin in the back, and then Violet, who is from a private farm. She's leading up the rear. And then in the front, we have Ophelia. She is a Hog Island. She's one of our eldest sheep on the farm, and she was actually born here. And she is a dark-faced, dark wool Hog Island, which is quite rare. And we were just talking earlier, again, that they just all got a haircut on April 25th. So they look a little different than here. And there's one of our sheep getting shorn. In the 18th century, sheep were vital for their wool. They were also raised for meat and milk. Today, our sheep are both adorable, but they serve a really important purpose on our farm. Once we shear them, we use their wool, so washing, carding, spinning, dyeing, and weaving, just like they would have in the 18th century. And here are some other animals that we have on the farm. On the top, your top left is Rust, our milking shorthorn, and a fan favorite of the farm. He weighs anywhere between 2,300 and 2,500 pounds. So an ox is a neutered male that's been trained to do work. Think of him like a colonial tractor of the farm. He can pull heavy loads and he can plow. He is 11 years old. He'll be 12 in December of this year, and so he is semi-retired. So for part of our succession plan, below with Paige and Levi are our new team in training, 2-year-old Jersey steers Bean and Diesel. They were acquired from Flint Hill Education Farm, which is about an hour north of here, and their training will continue on our site for the next 2 years until they earn that title of ox. So they will get a little taller and a lot wider, but they won't become as big as Rust. And then we also have our 2 horses. The top is Toby with myself and one of our volunteers, Jenny, during an event, and then Toby giving the side eye on the left and Ben on the right. And they both serve interpretive purposes on our farm. Here we go.
There we go.
Always get one or the other. So the farmstead also maintains a kitchen herb and dye garden, as well as plants and harvests wheat, barley, rye, broom corn, flax, dent corn, flint corn, also known as Indian corn, and potatoes. So many things that you heard in both Pratt's inventory. And our crops are heritage varieties as much as possible. So here are two images from the wheat harvest and the kitchen garden from the 70s and 80s. And in comparison, we have two images today of our kitchen garden and then wheat harvest. So what do we do with all of this information that I've just told you, all this research we did, the land, the animals, and the crops?
Ah.
Oh, too far.
We're one ahead. There we go.
There we go. So the farmstead is a living history museum, but it's also an active working farm. So visitors are invited to step into the past with us and experience the challenges, triumphs, and daily rhythms of colonial farmers during a transformative period in American history. We accomplish this through hands-on programming, special events, and skills workshops where students and visitors can learn about, but most importantly to me, participate in these skills that made 18th century life possible. So some of our highlighted skills are up here, but we also do daily and seasonal activities, including plowing, harvesting, planting, hearth cooking, spinning, weaving, natural dyeing, hearth cooking, I think blacksmithing, woodworking, and more. We also do outreach programs like this and bring our skills and equipments into the community.
I gotcha.
Thank you, Paige.
You're welcome.
Thank you to my assistant this evening.
Oh, nope. Don't give thanks yet. There we go.
And so here are some of our upcoming program events and skills workshops. So all of this information is on our website or the QR code, but I just wanted to give a sense of the wide variety of things that we offer. So we do skills workshops, again, events and programs, all featuring Rust, and he has his own Instagram account, Rust and Friends. So he's very happy to be here. So we're happy to answer any questions. Thank you so much for coming out, and thank you again to Delaware Historical Society for having us this evening. Okay.
I actually had a question. So we were there just like last week, and you pointed out like a very tiny little building. And I remember you guys said something to the effect of like you weren't sure what it was for. So I wanted to ask, do you know if like at any point, so I saw that it's like kind of a two-story where it's like built into a hill. And so that second floor, would there have been like some sort of flooring where like it was separated, or it was like, you know, it wasn't, what do you call it, like where it's split flooring? I was wondering because maybe they used it for drying wheat and barley for like producing beer or something like that, or any evidence of that, or?
That's a good question. We're not entirely sure. So the building we're referencing is what we call the stone cabin. So if you're on site, it's behind our garden. It is the oldest building on the property, we believe, so predating the house. We call it the stone cabin because it is a small stone building. Yeah, the original purpose were not clear. The archaeologists and historians, as part of the founders, they thought it could have been an original dwelling space. They could have thought it might have been a spring house because it is built into the side of the hill. And there's an active spring underneath. They thought it was a smokehouse. They thought it might have been a dwelling place for Susanna, Peggy, Cuffy, or York at one point. It could have been for grain storage. We use it for textiles right now. We do know if you look at the side of it that it was, the roof was more pitched at one point. So there is kind of an angle that you can see where it was more of a thatched roof style. So you can tell it's a very old building, but the original purpose, it probably was a lot of things over the 300 years and evolved as the farm evolved, as they got more buildings, as they got more barns, the usage probably changed, but it could have been a lot of things, including that. Mm-hmm.
So that one sheep is a hog island?
Yes, I have 3 hog islands.
So is that the same hog island that became Philadelphia International Airport?
That I don't.
No, I think
It's a hog island off
I
the
think
coast
it's Scotland.
of
Off of Scotland? Is this-
Oh,
I'm not
Carolina.
sure about that, but I don't think
There's-
it's our Hog Island.
Yeah.
There is one off the Carolinas, Virginia, and Georgia that it came from as well. So yeah, probably from England, Ireland, and over. But it is Hog Island. map here right there. Hog Island is a very typical 18th century sheep. By comparison, the Leicester Longwolves that we saw, and if you come on our site, our Leicester Longwolves, they're big sheep. So they were bred to be larger and have longer fibers, and they're actually experimenting with this breed during this time period, named Robert Bakewell and George Washington are experimenting. So you kind of see the transition between a Hog Island and the Leicester Longwolves. Longer staple for meat, for milk, a little bit larger as well. So kind of two different types of sheep. I'm going to go back and then I'll get to you, Betsy. Last row.
Has the land been metal detected to find artifacts?
So they did archaeological digs that stopped in the 1990s. We have had a few people come out and do a little bit of metal detecting. Because we're within the state park, we have to adhere to the policies within the park, so we haven't had a ton of people come out. But we do have every once in a while someone comes out. They haven't found anything major yet, and we hope in the future we might do some more archaeological digs or organize our archaeological collection to really figure out what we have. But that's a great question, because I'm sure there's still more on our site with 300 years of kind of active inhabitation there.
We do dig in the garden.
It's true. Yeah, every time we plow, technically we're doing our own little dig. Oh, Betsy, you want to go?
I was just gonna
Yeah.
and we have Hannah too, who's really, an example of one of the most primitive.
Hannah's a sheep.
Hannah is a Soe, yeah, off of Scotland.
Yes, off the coast. She is a Soe.
Can see what
I have two different types of
what
wool
sheep
here.
used to be, which I think is really interesting.
He is,
I have
yeah,
Hog
we have some wool.
Island, and then I also have Soye. The Soye wool naturally falls off, and then this was sheared last week off of, I believe, Gus.
Yeah, we think it's Gus, so we'll pass that around.
We can do a little bit classroom style, take a feel.
Sorry, go ahead, yeah.
Are you doing Halloween again? That we can hear about that scallywag?
No,
Fun. That was really fun.
this year we are transitioning to a different story, so we'll bring Sandy Flash back in a couple years. This year we're doing Wicked Elizabeth Wilson. So it is the trial of Elizabeth Wilson. For folks that know, there's a lot of kind of mystery around that, a little bit of drama, but it is, I won't give too much away for that, but it is a geographical, very geographic prevalent.
She wasn't a scallywag.
She was not. She perhaps was a victim of her time or a criminal. Kind of, that's up to you to tell. Yes.
Did the family have its own cemetery?
Oh, that's Chuck and Betsy, their own cemetery. Are we aware of anything?
They're scattered. Most of them are in Goshen, Friends. Pratt the Fourth is in Marshallton, in Chester County, because he moved there, West Bradford. But most of them are in Goshen. I think a couple of them might be in Middletown, Friends. But most of them ended up getting buried in Friends cemetery.
Well, here, I'll let my son ask.
Yeah, I'm sorry, friend. I've seen your hand up. Go ahead, bud.
And then I have a question. Go ahead, bud.
Do we have a dog in your farm?
Ooh, that's an excellent question. We do not have a dog at our farm right now. Our farmer would love to have a dog, but that's not going to work out at the moment. So he has chickens and turkeys in his house instead. But no, that's a really great point. We talked about a lot of the animals that you would see in a farm. We have a barn cat, but a dog would have been an important part of the farm as well. So great question. Next time you come, we'll have to get a dog. We'll put that on the record. Go ahead, Paul.
When you were talking about how when this was being established with the Bishop Mills Historical Society, and specifically with this bicentennial, talking about like shifting the focus away from like figures like George Washington, and do you know if there was any pushback against that? Because I know that even at that point in like 1976, that was a pretty radical idea to be like, hey, forget all the big names, we want to talk about like normal everyday people. So do you know if there was any sort of like people being like, no, we have to like include John Morton somehow? Or...
I imagine there was. We don't have documentation that clearly states there's pushback. Not that I have found. I'm sure it is there. There's a lot of information from that time period. I imagine certainly there was pushback. I know there certainly was pushback of people living there, kind of in period attire or operating the farm, restoring the property and operating the farm much like they would have in the 18th century. So a lot of things people are building, constructing, using 18th century tools and techniques. The idea of this experimental archaeology or this living history concept was unique to this area. So you do have places like Colonial Williamsburg, other place.
One in Massachusetts.
Yeah, Sturbridge Village, excuse me. Yeah, so there are places that are doing this at this time, but this small site restoring it and having real buildings that they're working off in the land is quite radical in of itself. So I have a master's degree in public history, and so going through my graduate studies, we were studying the Colonial Farmstead and Jay Anderson, one of the founders, in grad school before I even worked here. So it was big at the time for kind of two reasons. This focus outside of kind of the big names, and we still get pushback today as a site for not operating with the big names because we get the question of like, well, who is there? Why is this in?
Haven't they heard of Joseph Pratt?
I know. That's what I should say. You've had 4 opportunities to know about our Joseph Pratt.
4.1 and 4.2.
But this idea of like, why should, outside of these big names, especially with the 250th, why is this important? Why is our site important when you have really big names in the area? And I think that is, we tell the everyday person's story. Everyone can come and see themselves at the farm. But that's a great question. And I imagine what we're facing today, they had 50 years ago as well.
Not to mention Sarah and Esther Kane.
Yeah, all the women, everyone that was at the farm, that their name's not in a history book. But we've said it tonight. Yes, go
So
ahead.
the original property, the original farm had a lot of land, a lot of things, a lot of animals. Were they considered well off, or were they just sort of middle of the road? Where were they in financial society?
No, that's a great question, and it changes between the different Pratts. So we know it started off relatively small, and the land grew and got smaller. As the Pratts had sons, they were selling off some of the land or giving some of the land to their sons or other like family members. They were kind of upper middle class, I would say, especially with one of them was, I believe Joseph Pratt II was a tax collector. The second or third was a tax collector, and then Joseph Pratt IV had to sell off the land because he squandered things. So it kind of went peaks and valleys. So in the prime of 1760 to 1790, I would say they're more upper class. They do have more of a Quaker style in the house, even though they went in and out of Quakerism. So you can consider historic Waynesboro is right down the road from us, and it's a much more elevated style within the house. If you come in to our property, the house is quite plain by comparison. So there are like china on display. We do have kind of colors in our room, but it does feel rather kind of plain comparatively and very practical. But to answer the question, I would say roughly, most of the time, kind of an upper middle class situation. Yes, go ahead, Chuck.
The will of, I think it was Pratt I, much of his wealth, maybe about 50%, maybe even more than that, was actually from investment type of things rather than property and animals. So he had some of that, extra wealth.
Vanguard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the nature of the discussions that led to the name change from plantation to farmstead?
That is a great question. So it predated me coming here as well. So I know before coming here, there was a real hesitation to transition away. Plantation does have, for better or worse, generally for worse, does bring something very evocative to mind. So people think of plantation, Southern plantation, they also think of enslaved individuals. And so the original thinking was we didn't want to remove that name and remove the opportunity to have a conversation about Quaker enslavers, about enslaved individuals in the North. So a lot of history books and a lot of people are not necessarily aware about Northern slavery, and certainly not aware about Quakers being enslavers for a while. But then as we had more conversations with our community, with educators, with volunteers, with funders, with community partners, the overwhelming consensus and feedback we were getting from people is that we needed to make a change because folks were willing to have those conversations, but the word plantation in our name was very off-putting. It was turning people away, and we didn't want that to be a barrier to coming to our site. So we wanted to make sure that everyone felt welcomed and included to start that conversation about history, the challenging parts, again, the challenges, the triumphs, the successes, but also the really dark parts of the history as well. And so we have found with the transition of Farmstead, we are no longer kind of seeing folks unwilling to come out. It's kind of opened up our visitation to come and learn about all aspects of the history of the farm. And the name change was in 2024, roughly. If that helps answer your question, yeah. But it was 5 to 7 years of conversation and thoughtful discussion before we.
Remember when that happened?
Yeah.
Wasn't Sam Riddle involved somewhere? No?
He owned the land, and his niece married Walter Jeffords, and he gave them the farm as a wedding place.
Oh, okay. I knew he was in there somewhere.
Thank you.
He amassed 32 different farms across Edgewater Township to make that parcel.
Was that the first Sam Riddle or the second?
The first Sam Riddle was the miller who had the
The
mill.
from Belfast, Ireland.
His son Sam Riddle
The
was the
racehorse
one who
owner.
owned the racehorse.
James
Yeah.
D. Riddle had the,
Yeah.
The bad guy in
Yeah.
the family wealth.
Or
Same
no,
with
it's
Doyle.
Seabiscuit.
Yeah, the bad
He
guy in
had Man of War and Borat.
Yeah, no, thank you. And it's so interesting that this piece of property has a much larger story within the Jeffords property within Ridley Creek State Park. One of the things I think we forget, and I certainly do when you're driving through Ridley Creek, it's beautiful. It can be quiet. It's immersive. You don't see a lot of traffic. And I think we forget, certainly myself, that this was an active community with lots of farms and families and workers. So thank you for helping us make that connection.
The crime of the century is that Edgemont Country Club couldn't have been annexed. Now it's McMansion. Yeah.
Right, yeah, right on the other side of our, yes, one of our Bean and Diesel, actually, Bean took himself a trot through the woods and thought he would check out that neighborhood. So yes, they wanted to see what was over there, and it's not the country club anymore. He was safely returned. He just literally greener grassers, he thought. So he wanted a little snack. He was fine.
We often got calls from the country club to come get the house.
Oh, good. Okay. So he was, for our 50th anniversary, he's just honoring a tradition of having access. So I will let him know. Thank you. Go ahead, in the back.
I'd like to hear about the ice cream day.
Oh, excellent. So we're trying some new programming for the 250th. So we like to say that 250th is every year for us because we celebrate kind of the Revolutionary era. And so we are kind of highlighting different components of colonial farmers. And I'm really excited because National Ice Cream Day lands on a Sunday. So we're doing Ice Cream Sunday and talking about ice cream in the 18th century. We will be making ice cream, probably vanilla as a standard flavor, although we will be talking about some of the more interesting flavors, shall I say, like Parmesan and oyster. But I really don't think that like oysters and raw milk should go together. But talking about where ice came from, where dairy products came. So yeah, we will invite people to come out, help make ice cream. There'll be Costco-sized samples of ice cream and maybe a sundae bar to really kind of bring in a fun level of the colonial spirit.
We can find some raspberries to put on it.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, but I've been holding on to that program for several years until National Ice Cream Day landed on a helpful day for me.
You didn't happen to call Bassett, did you? Because I know Bassett came out to Mount Moriah Cemetery and they brought the truck right
Oh,
next to
nice.
Bassett's grave. It was great.
There you go.
And gave out ice cream.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. You know where to find us, Ridley Creek State Park.
Our big thanks again to Sarah and Paige from the Colonial Pennsylvania Farmstead. Can we get one more round of applause for them? Again, our thanks to you guys for coming out. They are also on Delco Gives, so log on. You can find them on there. Please visit them. They are at the Ridley Creek State Park. It's a wonderful place to visit. A couple quick announcements before we disperse.